the Vagabond Way podcast. The journey goes ever on with the long road. This episode, a deep tube of love. Now that's not a deep tube of love, to be clear. Rather, a deep love of tubas. Some tuba-based silliness from the long road this week, aka The Ridiculous, followed by an entry from The Vagabond Diary of Steve Bonham, aka The Sublime, proving how in one episode we can have silly and serious sharing the same atmosphere. Kev takes us on a jaunt to North Africa for his latest Kafe Korner as well. The Vagabond Way podcast featuring the long road is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. If those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Lydon. I hope that this latest episode from The Long Road finds you, as well as can be expected whilst we're in the midst of all this stuff. A slightly wild episode this week, I suppose. Some fripperies, some serious stuff, some thoughtful, some thought-provoking. A mix of things, just as we like it here at Vagabond HQ. I'll not chat here too long, lots of hashtag content to get through. Don't forget though, our new EP release, Out of the Darkness, is out now. Check it out on Bandcamp, on Spotify. There's videos for 3 of the 4 songs that are up on YouTube. Do You, On a Bridge Across the River, and If There's a God Out Here. We are working on the final video for this EP, Waiting on a Storm, right now, so it should be out in a week or 2. There is a new episode of our Transatlantic Connection show, which came out on Tuesday, just gone. Search YouTube or Facebook for the Transatlantic Connection show. The episode is even available to watch on our Instagram page, which is very flash. So look on Instagram for Do It The Vagabond Way. That's our username. Fab chats with Mark Mandeville and Rayanne Richards, an Americana folk duo from Massachusetts, USA. Our own Kev Moore chats with Stuart Jones from Woodworm Studios about the current state of the music industry. And our very own Steve Bonham takes you behind the curtain of how he incorporated his musical life with his other professional lives in his new book, How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World. On to today's content for the podcast. It's come up several times over the years. Just exactly what role does the tuba play, or has the tuba played, in the history of popular music? Whether that's actual pop music, or rock music, or any of the in-between bits or bits around the edges. So here we are having a chat about all things tuba. So here we are again, the long road reunited digitally. I'm at home in Manchester, and we've got Steve at home in Derbyshire.
Hey up, me lovely ducklings.
Good regional hello there. And Kev is at home in Spain.
Buenos dias, ¿cómo estás?
There we go. We've got to up our game a bit with the languages there. Or I need to develop a really thick Manc accent. It's come up over the years, so I thought it's one of those things we might talk about one of these days in the podcast. Our pal Stuart from Woodworm Studios, he came up with this brilliant nickname for the instrument I play, the tuba, and he called it a grunt trumpet. So I was just having a think, and maybe Kev or Steve, you've got some ideas yourselves about the role of the tuba in the in the world of rock and pop.
I think the germ of this idea came from, I think I was talking to you, Steve, about my mate Clive Sarstead, and he'd had I think Herbie Flowers on one of his albums. I think he played the bass. And Steve said to me, and of course Herbie was an exponent also of the tuba, which indeed he was. And then when you sort of dig a bit deeper into the rock music and what have you, the tuba has made surprising appearances. I mean, obviously it's in a lot of Herbie's work, but Blood, Sweat and Tears, right? They had a full-time tuba player, Dave Bargeron. I mean, he was like, he played other brass as well, but he was primarily a tuba player with Blood, Sweat and Tears were amazing, The Stones, the Rolling Stones, Something Happened to Me Yesterday.
Oh, yes, of course.
Features the tuba. The Rolling Stones. I mean, you don't get more rock and roll than that.
I love that, yeah.
The Kinks album, Muswell Hillbillies.
Yes.
Yeah. John Beecham played tuba on that, and it's rumoured he might have also played on Preservation Act 1 and Preservation Act 2. And going into the pop genre, I believe you'll be able to confirm this better, Chris, probably with your trained ears of this version. About 2 minutes in on Happy Together, which is one of the great pop songs of all time, some tuba sneaks in there.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to have a listen to that in depth. I remember one of the times when we were in the studio and Stuart would ask about the grunt trumpet, as he had christened it by then. What do you want it to sound like? Do you want it to sound like a tuba or a bass guitar? You know, I think that's a choice people are making about whether they use an instrument as it was intended, or to try to pull off a slightly different sound, the same word but different sound. But yeah, the grunt trumpet, it's got its place.
It's got a role.
It has, and of course, if you count when they use marching, Tusk by Fleetwood Mac features a big marching band. That's plenty of tuba going on.
Oh yeah,
of
course, great, yeah.
We've got it on quite a few tracks, and Hummingbirds is my favourite, and then an old song that Chris and I did called Badger Hill.
Yes, it's nice.
Beautiful line. It's almost Elgarian, yeah, that Chris plays with Tom Leary playing the fiddle on top of it.
I've enjoyed it when we've had, when Chris has played like a really nice, almost, that's probably the wrong word, but like a descanty sort of melody, and there's room for my bass underneath as well. It's nice.
Yeah, and we've sort of done that trick on a few songs over the years. We started experimenting actually back with Badger Hill, and some of the things that back then me and Steve were playing were a bit more folky, sort of guitar and tuba duo gigs we were doing, and found that there's this nice line to be found in the sort of mid-upper range of the tuba where it can play these nice little melodies, sometimes mimicking little bits of the bass line, but actually it's sort of more of a baritone line kind of thing, but it works really well. And we've done that on a bunch of songs. I mean, even on things like Wrapped Up in You recently, there's a little tuba line in there. We snuck a little bit into an upcoming single that's coming out in a few weeks, Do You? There's a little tuba bit in there now. And it's almost like another voice, a sort of, voice without words, I suppose. But it's pretty tricky. It's tricky to handle in a mix, as you say. We've got to watch out for the bass and the tuba part, but actually it can add a real depth and warmth. I mean, personally, I love it. I mean, I'm predisposed to it, I think, aren't I?
And I remember in the early days, being told by an engineer, you should never layer the bass instrument, so you shouldn't have a bass guitar and a tuba would be horrific. But you and Kev have really hit the groove with that. It seems to work.
Yeah,
it seems to work wonderfully well. I mean, it's lovely.
Now, a little example from our archives of us using the tuba in this sort of more melodic way. I haven't checked, but I'm nearly sure we've played Hummingbirds on this podcast before. If not, check out the video for Hummingbirds on YouTube. It's a lovely, lovely song. But today I thought I'd play you perhaps one of the, forebears to Hummingbirds. That song that Steve references in that chat just then, a song called Badger Hill, which Steve wrote many years ago, and that me and him played lots when we went out as more of a sort of folky duo back in the day. It's one of those songs that would initially raise a chuckle as I reached over for the tuba, but generally people would be pleasantly surprised by the end of it. I shall leave you to decide for yourself. Now, Badger Hill, as far as I can remember / work out, relates to the meaning behind the name of my home village, the village in which Steve still lives, which, translated through Google Translate a few thousand times, comes out somewhere along the lines as Badger Hill. So here we are, enjoying a calm, gentle stroll through the Derbyshire countryside. Badger Hill.
There's a boy on a bike with some beer in a bag, scooting down a summer's day, never coming back. Hey now, to Badger Hill. There's a girl that is waiting with a smile on her face, swears she's just the cutest thing, the whole human race. From Badger Hill, swimming out in the old mill pond, fish between her toes and the stream beyond. Willows weeping as the shadows grow, calling for a breeze as the daylight slows. There's children building castles atwixt schemes of mud, just a call to do it, something in the blood of Badger Hill. Sailing across the barley, the wheat and the corn, watch the mist rising in the early, early morn. Over Badger Hill, swimming out in the old mill pond, fish between her toes in the stream beyond. Willows weeping as the shadows grow, calling for a breeze as the daylight slows. Gonna be the best and ever friends from Badger Hill. Swimming out in the old mill pond, fish between her toes in the stream beyond. Willows weeping as the shadows grow, calling for a breeze as the daylight slows. Over Badger Hill, over Badger Hill, over Badger Hill.
Following the tuba theme here a little, this next bit is almost an outtake from the start of a chat that Steve and I had a few weeks ago whilst Kev was out on his trek, and we accidentally spent 5 minutes talking about something entirely different to what we were going to talk about. I couldn't quite work out where to fit it, so I thought it would go in this week's show quite nicely, along with the other tuba-based content. You see, I'd done something very silly, and Steve couldn't help but bring it up. Not quite the three of us. We've managed to get two of us together. So me and Steve. So Steve's on the line from Derbyshire. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Christopher. Is that a sousaphone I see behind you?
Listeners, I've done something very silly. I've bought myself a sousaphone quite by accident. It's ginormous, and it's currently sat behind me, looming over my shoulder like some overprotective parent worried about what I'm doing on the internet.
It's unbelievable. It's got a name, Christopher. It's called Jupiter.
It's Jupiter.
It's like a racehorse.
Is Jupiter a Greek god or a Roman god? Is he the equivalent of
Jupiter?
Zeus
Yeah,
in one of them. Jupiter, I think, is one of those Greek gods.
In Old Holst, isn't it? Isn't it Jupiter's bringer or something? Is it peace?
Bringer of jollity.
Jollity,
which is about right. Isn't it?
Bishop, that is your forte, and
it's perfect.
Your purpose in life, your raison d'etre.
There was this phase when we were doing gigs, just you and me, with the guitar and tuba years ago. You know, I'd pick up the tuba and there'd be a chuckle around the audience. They'd go, "Oh, we haven't seen one of those in one of these before. That's fun."
I remember too, you and me and my daughter swimming in Collier Harbour, and the look of complete joy and unfettered excitement that came when bizarrely a man walked along the seafront playing a tuba.
Yeah.
And I remember later that night, as I tucked myself up in bed, receiving pictures from my daughter Sarah of you, who's found the man with the sousaphone. Prodigal son returns to his soil. Yeah.
It was a situation that only your oldest daughter could have possibly contrived. It's a photo I had printed. It's on my wall at home. A photo of
I think
me wrapped with this old sousaphone. And I mean, we were worse for wear that night. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And because I'd literally never played one before, and I didn't have to put it on.
Yeah.
It's pitched differently to what I'm used to. So my tuba is, for the fans out there, the tuba is pitched in E flat.
Yeah.
So my brain and my muscle memory is geared to a certain shape, meaning a certain pitch.
Yeah.
But this thing is pitched a fourth lower.
Yeah.
So what I think I'm aiming for, my brain just can't match up. So it was a right bugger to play as well. But I mean, that was August 2010 because I found the date a few days ago when I was looking up before and after photos. So yeah, 10 years ago was my first sort of parp on a sousaphone.
Embrace. I think one embraces a sousaphone.
Embrace, yes. My first tussle with a sousaphone.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we talked on the podcast before about the very gentle addiction that musicians suffer from.
Yeah.
And it happens. It's a common thing, and I've taken my next step into the
I
world
think
of...
so. It is not unknown for a guitarist to take their guitar to bed with them.
Yes.
The notion that you might climb into bed with your sousaphone is pretty intimidating, I think.
I'd need a bigger bed. I mean,
You would.
honestly, this thing is absolutely ginormous.
Yeah.
And a picture does not convey how big it is because you can't get a sense of the perspective.
No.
It's absolutely huge. But it's not super heavy, but I thought it would be lighter than the tuba because it's mostly... What's the material called?
Carbon fibre, is it? Or
I don't know if it's carbon fibre. I don't think it's that advanced, but I think it's essentially a very tough plastic,
right?
With a metal bit where the valves are. So I thought it would be significantly lighter. It's not significantly lighter than the tuba, but it does live on. It lives on your shoulder mainly. So
I mean, you could put out to sea in it, couldn't you?
cover up a few of the holes, but it would be quite seaworthy, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, that thing today is looming over my shoulder because you put it in a room and it does nothing but loom. It can't not loom. It's so big. But that has joined the family, and no doubt it will find its way onto our next bunch of recording, which we're doing in a couple of weeks.
Indubitably.
It will. And I dread to think what nickname our friend Stuart at Woodland is going to give it. He called the tuba a grunt trumpet. I don't know what he's going to call this one, but as soon as we find out, listeners, we'll let you know, because it's going to be ridiculous.
Excerpts from a Vagabond diary. I've been very lucky in my life to have travelled extensively. Lucky in the sense that it wasn't always deliberate or planned for. It's just someone asked me to go somewhere and I went a stage further. In these travels, the treasure has been the unexpected, the diamonds of chance meetings, the emeralds of new places, the rubies of unthought thoughts. Once I travelled with some companions in the Namibian bush. We travelled the length of Namibia from Botswana down towards the Orongo Mountains, which lie on the edge of the very forbidding Namib Desert. We made camp at the foot of a granite slab among the bush and under the camel thorn tree. Between two camel thorn trees, I slung my hammock. I'd had enough of sleeping on the ground and avoiding scorpions whose white ghostly bodies glowed in my ultraviolet head torch. The Orongo Mountains are basically a huge collapsed volcanic crater, a flat bushland in the middle, where one or two people farm, and mostly leopards and baboons roam. The flat middle is surrounded by steep granite volcanic rocks, which in the half-light of twilight or dawn take on the strange shapes of witches and 3 elephants. We were there for a few days. A few of us wannabe explorers. And Ben McNutt and the bearded Werner, a German Namibian and friend of the San Bushmen, whose tribal remnants are broken and dispersed across southern Africa, including here. One night I cooked a paella on a great big pan under the stars, determined to win from my friend Jason Webster the extreme paella world record. But on another day, scrambling under weather-worn yellow outcrops, we discovered Bushman paintings on the rocks. Perhaps the first people to see them since their creators disappeared. Mostly now in russet red, that all that remained when other colours have faded. There were men with bows, people dancing, women carrying children, giraffe and kudu that lingered on like reluctant ghosts. The images represented, said Werner, what the long-gone San Bushmen saw when they danced themselves into a trance. We stared, most of us, in a spirit of intense reflection, thinking of those who had once stood or crouched here an indeterminate time before, creating these enigmatic reflections of their world and their soul. Later we gathered from tents and hammocks around a fire as sparrow-weaver birds roosted in baskets of dried grass above our heads, and those scorpions scuttled under our feet, watched from a ledge above by a group of suspicious baboons. Werner cut himself a pipe and talked of these original people. He told of their cosmos, their ethos and their calamity. He told us of the days when it was perfectly legal to kill them, of the days when Dutch and British settlers would get themselves to church on Sunday, sing hymns of love and redemption, take a fine lunch of oryx or kudu, and then mount up on their horses and ride out to shoot the first people of Africa. A quiet hung on us as we felt the silent witness of their art and their long dead eyes watching. And at the end of the day, as I lay in my hammock, bits of a song came into my head, which I had started to write years and years back. Back then I couldn't work out what it was supposed to be, so I had put it down and left it. Now, as the leopard slipped through the darkness, I did. That song was We Were the First. It's a song about what we take away when we invade and conquer and colonize.
We were the first, we were the innocents who moved lightly across this land, traveled through the fire to find the healing, could hear the water's song, the earth's concealing. We were the first, we were the first, we were the first. But then they came, it's the end of days. There's those who hunt us down, chase us from the ground that we were born on, steal the stories, dreams and dances we get high on. And then they came, and then they came, and then they came. When all's been said and done, we're children of the sun, born under southern skies, in the gaze of a single eye. So speak my name out loud, speak my name out loud. and shoot us from the backs of wild-eyed horses. And so I pray a cry of rage, and so I pray. When all's been said and done, we're children of the sun, born under southern skies, in the gaze of a single eye. So speak my name out loud, speak my name out loud. Oh, now speak my name out loud. My brother Cain, you deserted me. Now I'm just a painting on the wall, an echo in the call of the leopards leaving, a shadow in the grass at the edge of evening. My brother Cain, my brother Cain, my brother Cain. When all's been said and done, we're children of the sun, born under southern skies, in the gaze of a single eye. So speak my name out loud, speak my name out loud. Oh, now speak my name out loud. Yes, speak my name out loud. Please speak my name out loud. We were the first.
Hello and welcome to another Kev's Cafe Corner. This week, dear listener, we're heading to Morocco and a little town called Essaouira, which is out towards the coast. There's like a highway, quite a new twin lane highway that goes from Marrakesh out to there. It's not really sort of particularly populated by cars, but there are a lot of donkeys on it. It's quite a strange sight, I have to say. But yeah, Essaouira is a lovely little town in Morocco, and it's got the souk, you know, and the fantastic bustling sort of bazaars and the spice stalls, absolutely myriad of colours and smells and experiences in there, and it's a wonderful place. I walked into this leather shop selling handbags and bags and various belts, etc. Browsed probably for about 40 seconds before the owner invited me for some mint tea, and cleared the bags from the shelves, which aren't really shelves. They are designed for what he was about to do, which is turn the place into like a little lounge, and you all sit cross-legged on these little levels of carpeted sort of areas and share tea with them. And there's no obligation to buy anything, but I guess most people do. But you just sort of enjoy the social atmosphere, the fact you're sat around with other travellers from other parts of the world, and it's really a genuine pleasure to go, I suppose you call it window shopping in these places. And if I'm honest, you know, the price of a small bag that you may or may not need as you leave is well worth paying to enjoy the company and stories of people from around the world and the hospitality of the stall holder. And so it was on one such day as this, and I'm wandering around the souk, and I heard this music literally drifting on the breeze, and it was absolutely hypnotic, and yet it had that insistent, there was something Western about it, and yet not. It had a vibe, it had a groove, and I'm thinking, yeah, and it just fitted with my mood and the atmosphere walking through these streets. And this amazing, interesting rhythms and atonal guitar and strange chanting and vocal. And I traced the source to this little sort of stall within like an archway, an alcove, and it was selling a myriad of total knockoff cassettes and CDs and what have you. And I asked the guy, who is this band? And that was my first introduction to one of the greatest world music acts that we've ever seen, I think, a band called Tinariwen. Now, Tinariwen were Mali tribesmen and who'd actually fought in wars, you know, to gain their independence and lived an incredible life in the desert. And they'd formed this band, you know. There's a beautiful photograph, very evocative of this band, of a camel with a couple of Dan Electro guitars slung over the saddle, and it's just that image completely conjures up the duality of what they do, the connection with the West, the exotica of it all, and the music was just hypnotic in every sense. And I just bought up what he had, you know, a couple of CDs, some cassettes. And as I enjoyed my trip in Morocco further over the next couple of weeks, heading up into the Atlas Mountains, this was just the perfect accompaniment to be listening to this music as I drove through these regions. And it became one of my favourite alternative artists, really, and I realised then that they'd collaborated with the likes of, I think, Peter Gabriel and Robert Plant and what have you, and a lot of people have sought these guys out because they're pretty unique, and I can think of no better way to discover a new band than in that scenario, surrounded by the smells of the Moroccan cooking, the sights of the spices and the people and the bustle of this foreign land, and to have that music coming at you through the airwaves, and following it to its source and buying it for yourself was just quite a special moment for me. And whenever I listen to Tinariwen's music now, I am back in Essaouira and the Atlas Mountains. So that's my little anecdote for today, ladies and gentlemen. Another record shop such as it was, in an alcove in a little Moroccan town, and aren't they often the best? Until the next time.
I think this week's episode is full enough. Plenty to be chewing on here. Some silliness, some thoughtfulness, some calm. You know, all the spirit of a Bishop's Daily Bread segment is peppered throughout this episode as it is. So only a very brief missive from me this time. I slipped into that not having any bread sort of scenario again this week, but managed to curtail it a little bit sooner this time, got things back on track, baked a loaf, and things were going okay again. We're at full pelt here at Vagabond Towers, gearing up for our time in the recording studio next week, including filming for the music videos. So the days are going to be very, very full, and actually not much time for baking or cooking or anything. So we'll have to box clever probably with a few easy bakes. You know, I've obviously been designated chief baker for the week. Perhaps a no-knead bread or two. You know, we'll come up with some things. Anyway, more kitchen updates next time. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening wherever in the world you are. Subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. The next episode will be out next Friday. Join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/The Vagabond Way. Search for The Vagabond Way or Steve Bonham The Long Road on Facebook. You'll find us. All of our music is on Bandcamp, where you can help support a positive ecosystem for the music industry. Download, streaming, vinyl, CDs, it's all there. Head to thevagabondway.bandcamp.com. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons, and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Stuart Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your ongoing support. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, you, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of things that we make. So, become a Vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon, to help us create music, live performances, books and short stories, this weekly podcast, our YouTube show, and some new things we're cooking up. As a Vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive livestream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the Vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.